Welcome to today's edition of the Author's Corner, brought to you by KNEO 91.7 FM The Word. I'm Roberta Foster, and today I welcome Suzanne Woods Fisher back to Author's Corner. She has now written the book A Healing Touch, which is published by Revell, and that's a division of Baker Publishing Group, and she'll tell you more about how to find this book and her others as we get towards the end of the program. Here's just a little bit about Suzanne. She is an award-winning, best-selling author of more than 40 books, including The Sweet Life, The Secret to Happiness, and Love on a Whim, as well as many beloved contemporary romance and Amish romance series. She's also an author of several nonfiction books about the Amish, and so if knowing more about the Amish people and how they interact in life, there might be a couple of good books for you to research. Anyway, Suzanne, thank you so much for being back with us on Author's Corner.
Thank you, Roberta. And one thing I love about the way you introduced me is that if you're interested in reading more about the Amish, and they are really part of America's history. I mean, they are the fastest growing population group in North America. They are really part of our story. I love learning more about them. But this book, A Healing Touch, I consider almost a hybrid, because there's a lot of non-Amish characters that you're viewing the Amish through their lens, which I think is really one of the most intriguing parts of studying about the Amish, because we're not meant to all be Amish. It's not really how it happens. They grow from the inside out.
Right.
And yet I think there is so much about their lifestyle. I'm not trying to make them perfect, but I think there's so much about them that, like I said, they're Americans, and they are holding true to traditions.
Right.
They are wise about what they embrace. They're cautious and careful about some new things. They're build community like nobody's business.
Yes.
And there's just a lot we can learn from them. So I agree with you. If you're interested, this is a good book to start with.
It is. And like you said, you blend the it's not a story about internal Amish community, but it incorporates those that are Amish with what they call the English, and it starts with our main character of Doc Stoltzfus. I'm messing that up, so I'll let you say
Stoltzfus. A German name.
Yeah. And so why don't you tell us about your main character?
Well, one thing I love about this character, her name is Ruth Stoltzfus, and she's affectionately known as Doc. And she is the kind of doctor who still makes house calls, which is the kind of doctor we all long for. Somebody who's going to answer our calls and really check up with us. And she is a person who actually was raised Old Order Amish and left prior to baptism to pursue higher education. And that's how she actually, God often does this, circles us back to our past, and that's where she is. She had there's a lot of backstory to why she left. It was a untidy departure. She and her mother had a lot of tension. So I think because of that, she's kind of settling some issues in her own life as she's back among the Amish. But she also understands them. She speaks their language. She has a real understanding of an appreciation for using alternative medical treatment, not just, respecting those who choose, just like I mentioned, alternative or even maybe choices that we might not consider in a non-Amish community, just like end-of-life choices and things like that. So I think that's what's really interesting about her, is that she has one foot in the door, but she's also got some distance and detachment.
And one of the themes in your book, which I love the fact that you have incorporated so many different themes through her patients. So tell us about some of the different patients that she's treated that you write about.
There's probably two other main characters in this book. So it's really, there's some romance going on there, but it's a lot about three women and how they are accepting changes in their life. And you've got Doc, you've got her assistant, Annie Fisher, no relation. She is a Amish young woman, super bright, crippled by a shyness that is crippling to her. And yet she has this dream to become an EMT, which is based on a true story. I know some female Amish EMTs, which is kind of a neat backstory to that. And then you've got another woman, a non-Amish woman named Bee Bennett, who is a former Olympic elite equestrian. And, Roberta, I had so much fun interviewing that. She's a woman who really had such a dynamic past, and yet came to a point where her life kind of has just stopped. Her husband died suddenly. They're in a new home. She hasn't even unpacked boxes.
Mm-hmm.
She's been diagnosed with breast cancer. Doc tends to overhelp, and she is really to overhelp B get past all this. And she connects her to an Amish woman.
Yeah.
And the way the Amish grieve is so differently than, I think, the way we sort of stuff it and move on. And there's a lot of how do I say it, just B. Bennett is learning to release by getting to know this Amish woman.
Mm-hmm.
And that's almost a little bit of a theme of the whole story. Everyone's having to learn to hold on lightly, to release the things that are not meant for them, or the things that are holding them back. Annie with her, shyness, B with the boxes of her husband's stuff. And then we haven't even talked about Doc has had a little baby suddenly enter her life. There's a little abandoned baby on her doorstep that turns out to be connected to her husband, and because they are the only relatives in the state of Pennsylvania, the state has asked them to take emergency foster care of this little baby. Doc doesn't want to do this. She's in her late 50s. Suddenly having an infant in her life was not her plan.
Right.
So again, she's learning to release as well, and that's kind of a little bit of that quiet theme, and the author's trying to weave through the whole story and wrap it up with a neat bow at the end.
Well, and that is true, which is one of the things that I loved about reading this book. It was dealing with many different life's issues. And so I'm sure that the reader will enjoy that. Let me remind them, I'm talking with Suzanne Woods Fisher regarding the book, A Healing Touch. It's published by Revell, a division of Baker Publishing Group. And you're listening to Author's Corner. I'm Roberta Foster. And as you mentioned, a baby was introduced to Doc, and at a later age, which, as you'd mentioned, she had plans not to have a family because of all that was going on with her and her police officer husband. But, God has a way of using different things in our life to teach us different lessons. And so Doc was okay to bring this baby into the home. And then, to her surprise, I imagine, she got attached.
Little by little. And what's fun about this baby, well, I have to say this is based on a true story of a friend of mine who gave me permission to use this story. So I took a lot of the same things that I had been listening to my friend talk about over the year. And one thing that was so kind of shocking and startling and sweet and sad is that this baby was just a dream baby. Just almost like the baby knew he was a house guest and did not overstay his welcome, And so, and that's not always true of babies. I mean,
right.
You get what you get. But this one was just very hard to not love and enjoy. And little by little, Doc, who reluctantly agreed to a week or so, her husband said tops, as it turns into months. And then her husband starts talking about possibly adopting the baby. And this is really a shocking twist for Doc to think she really had her life trajectory on the target, and all of a sudden in her late 50s, she's not thinking she's going to be going to PTA when she's 70. That was just not her plan, and yet her husband has just little by little kind of said, look, this child is in our life for a reason, and we're going to say yes. And she starts to kind of come around and get to that point, and I won't spoil it at all because that would really wreck the story, but there's a very sweet ending to this that I think results in a lot of growth. And again, like we said, holding on lightly is so much of what we have to learn in life.
Well, another one of the discussion points in your book is just the blending of the old order Amish to the English, and how you weave that together so beautifully. And you mentioned the character B and dealing with grief. And I just found that so compelling, just drawing me in as I read the book, of how how people need help sometimes in actually grieving and getting, I'm not sure what the right word is, moving past, and growing past that very personal hurt.
Well, Bea Bennett, I mentioned she was this really hotshot equestrian, and she became a breeder out of that experience with horses and just loves her horses passionately. And one thing I learned in studying and researching breeders of really these high-level horses is that they become hoarders, Hoarder. They almost hoard the genetics. And Bea could not let her horses go. She was breeding more horses, but had a reason why each one, she needed them. She couldn't let that one go. They all reminded her too much of the horse that she'd gone to the Olympics with. That was just the love of her life almost. And I think this is one of the things that being connected to an Amish woman who had a very different perspective on letting go was so powerful, because not only did Bea hoard genetics, but she sort of hoarded her husband's things. She didn't want to touch anything and that he had. And here she's connected to an Amish woman who, by the end of the day of her husband's passing, they were starting to pack up, and because they believed, well, somebody can use these things, and he certainly can't.
Right.
So, totally different way of thinking for me, and shocking. And it wasn't even easy for her, but little by little, she started to try, and just one thing at a time. She started with the easiest things first, and little by little started to let go. And then her life kind of really moved. It's almost like a river, like water finding its way down a path, and it starts to pick up speed, and she really comes to a much better place.
From our conversation, I know our listeners are going to go, wow, there's a lot in that book, and there certainly is. It will be one that you'll have a hard time putting down. And so perhaps we should tell our listeners more about how they can find a copy of your book, A Healing Touch.
Well, I encourage you to go right now to Baker Bookhouse, but you can find this book, A Healing Touch, at any retailer. And I always welcome readers to come find me at my website, www.SuzanneWoodsFisher.com. There's a connect button, and I really try to answer back within 24 hours if I can. And I love connecting with readers. It's kind of the best part of the author gig.
All right. Well, do you want to give us a little teaser about the subject of your new book?
A Year of Flowers is such a lovely Christmas story, Roberta, because it is actually a novella collection, 4 stories in one, beautiful cover, and it is about 3 young women who work in a flower shop as teenagers, and something dreadful happens, and they scatter. So each novella finds them 7 years later, what they're doing with flowers, and the 4th novella brings them all back to face that dreadful thing. But one other thing I love is that the first novella starts with a wedding, the last novella ends with a Christmas wedding, and it's the same wedding 7 years later.
Oh, wow.
I know. So I hope that intrigues readers to give it a chance, because it's just a wonderful, if you love flowers, and who doesn't, you're going to really enjoy A Year of Flowers.
Wonderful. Well, the book we've talked about today is called A Healing Touch. It's written by Suzanne Woods Fisher, and we certainly thank Revell, a division of Baker Publishing Group, for giving us a copy of the book. Suzanne, it's been a true pleasure talking with you. Thank you so much for being with us on Author's Corner.
Thank you, Roberta.
And if you missed any part of today's interview or would like to hear it again, you can now find it on your favorite podcast platform or through kneo.org. And to our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. This is Roberta Foster on the Author's Corner. Join me again next time.
Hi, this is Luke Taylor with the Sky High Podcast Network. If you've been blessed by the program that you're listening to, I'd like to personally ask you to consider supporting our station. Our network is a collection of programs produced by KNEO Radio in Neosho, Missouri, a nonprofit station dedicated to educating Christians, reaching the lost, and making an eternal impact. This program is just one of many designed to encourage, equip, and inspire you in your walk with Christ. To help keep these programs going strong, visit kneo.org and click the donate button. And if you'd like to let us know in the memo line that you're a listener of this program, we would truly appreciate it. Thank you for being part of what we're doing here at the Sky High Podcast Network. If today's program spoke to you, please prayerfully consider supporting our mission. Together, we can make a difference for eternity.